all happened so long ago, it sounds like I feel like it happened to a different person. You know, I was 19 then, I'm 86 now. Well, I was born on September 28, 1925 in a house over on Oak Street. Most people were born at home in those days. And actually, as you know, we didn't come out of the Depression until the Second World War began. When we began to come out of the Depression. And everybody worked, and everybody had come off from most of our agrarian people used to. The farmers used to working hard on the farm. And they were glad to get, used to working. Everybody worked. We didn't have any welfare. Everybody had to work. And nobody thought anything about it. And we didn't have a lot of things growing up. We had a lot of friends. And I remember after supper every night, we'd sit on the front porch and the neighbors would walk by and we'd visit with them. And we'd walk downtown and go what they call window shopping. Even Ted Bowman's down there had all the jewelry and everything was left in the store windows overnight. Nobody broke in and stole it. It wasn't considered, nobody even thought such a thing. And then now you lock it up good enough to keep folks from taking it. But if you did wrong in those days, you got punished right away. It didn't go on forever and ever and amen. When we were coming along, the biggest fear we had would be 4F. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to go to the army. People wanted to go. They were trying to defend our country. And of course, I guess maybe all of us had gone through school and we studied the Constitution and we studied all about our government and how it worked. Makes a difference, maybe. I was a student at Dachau High School in 1942 and my dad said, "Son, you get ready to go into service, you need to go to military school." So he enrolled me in Maryland Military Institute for 2 years. It's probably the greatest thing he ever did for me because when I went into the service, I was used to uniforms, orders, I knew all about the nomenclature, the basic arms we used. And from there, I went on to Fort McClellan, inducted at Fort McClellan in 1944. And then I was sent to Fort Knox, Kentucky for basic training in the tanks. And Fort Knox, of course, has been closed down for tanks that have all been sent to Fort Benning in Columbus, Georgia. My group that I was with was destined to go to the Pacific. And the night before I went off to the Army, I had a date with Celeste Carmichael then. And I'd been in the camp, she had been about a week. And they came and got me and put me in quarantine for a month, and I couldn't figure it out. For a while, they said my dad had found out Celeste had come down with polio, so he called whoever wanted the people in the Army there, and they quarantined me for a month. Well, all the troops I was training with had moved on to the Pacific by the time I got out, and I was sent on to the Western Front. And I've always told Celeste she saved my life because we were at least in Western civilizations. The Pacific was not. It was a strange, very difficult situation for everybody. Shipped out on the Queen Mary, and she did not sail in a convoy because she was so fast. But she did change course every 7 minutes because the Germans took 10 minutes to aim their torpedoes. And we landed in the Firth of Clyde, which is in Scotland, boarded a train, went down to Southampton. They put us on board a Polish freighter and locked us below in the hold so we couldn't get out. And we landed in Lahore. And from there we took a French train to Metz, France. And that's where I joined the 702nd Tank Battalion, 3rd Army, General Patton's Army. And we began the battle then, which is called the Battle for Central Europe. And we went from Metz to Gotha and Jena and Erfurt. And we thought we were headed for Berlin, but then they stopped us and said, "No, you're to go to Prague, Czechoslovakia." And so we started toward Prague, and before we got there, they changed their mind and let the Russians have it. So then they sent us on down to Nuremberg and Regensburg. And then we went from Regensburg and Nuremberg, Germany, down into Linz, Austria. German M4. They were easy to build, easy to maintain. But during the Second World War, there was a cigarette lighter called Zippo. And they were wonderful because they lighted on the first strike. Was so did our tanks. So we called them Zippo tanks because every time they got hit, they exploded in fire. Bang, you were gone. It used to take about three tanks to get one German tank. And one of the bad things about our tank, some of them have radial engines, so they're air cooled, and they just suck the cold air through the tank, just nearly froze to death. And you know, when you close up in a tank and you start firing those big guns, and also the machine guns, all that cordite stuff stays inside there, and you breathe all that, and then you get nervous and get sick and get scared and throw up, and all that's in the mix together, and you kind of breathe that that aroma for a while. It gets kind of interesting. And then if you happen to be in a swampy area, you had to keep the tank moving all the time because the tank tread would freeze to the mud, and you couldn't move it then. It was locked in, so you had to keep it rocking back and forth all the time. And we used to take our sea rations and go in the back of the tank and open up the engine compartment, put them in there and keep them hot so we could get hot food. And, you know, when you're 19 and 20, you do a lot of things you can't do at a later age. Our tanks had very little. Now, toward the last of the war, we got what we called a Pershing tank. It had a 76 millimeters. And it was high power, high velocity. And it was a wonderful tank, but it came too late to do much good. We lost a lot of men. When they hit a tank, it literally blew it all to pieces. I mean, their turret would go up maybe 300 feet. And the worst thing I ever saw was what they call an HE, a high explosive shell. I mean, AP, armor piercing, went through the side of a Sherman, but it didn't go out. It went inside and just spun around and around and around and just ground those people up in little pieces. Well, remember now, these tanks are taken back to a depot and reprocessed. So somebody had to go down in there and clean all that mess out and get all the dead in their body, and then they had to paint them, but they never could get the odor of body odor out of it. Too many little pieces. Ground them up like sausage. And we had hospitals just for those in the tankers who were burned, and we had a lot of guys that all you could see was the holes for the eyes and the ears and the mouth because they've been so badly burned. And there were no reflective surfaces in these hospitals, so the troops couldn't see what they looked like. So many of them died because we didn't have any way to take care of them properly. There was so many burns. Kind of like the Air Force, when they crashed, they caught fire too.
Did you have a hard time dealing with the fact that so many people were dying around you?
No, you don't. You're so busy trying to stay alive yourself, you don't really think about that. When the bullets start flying, you don't look around. But it was one thing in the wintertime, the bodies is not just frozen the way they fell, you know. And the graves registration would come along and pick them all up. And that would be a hard duty, I think, graves registration. They had to pick them up and identify them and bury them. And there's thousands that probably still missing and never knew what happened to them. Had no idea. They just disappeared. Well, in an artillery barrage, these blew people all to pieces. There's nothing to pick up. The biggest problem we found as we went along during the war, there were no factories, there were no grocery stores, there was nothing. So we went into a town, and if they didn't surrender, the General Patton just turned everything loose and blew the thing apart. Well, most of them surrendered. Had bed sheets hanging out the windows. And then we had to feed them and look after them medically because there was nothing. They had no doctors, no medicine, no nothing. So they depended on us to look after them. And sometimes we'd be giving injections for typhus, do various things. There'd be maybe 20 people in line, or there'd be 20 different languages spoken at the same time because all the slave labor had been brought in from all over Europe. And we had a terrible time trying to give those people shots because the Germans killed so many of them by giving them injections, and they thought we were going to kill them. And it was wild. We had one fellow with us who spoke fluent Russian, and he threatened to kill anybody that told him he spoke Russian because he said, "I want to go home. I don't want to stay over here being an interpreter." But we had a lot of them from Chicago who spoke fluent Polish because there's a big Polish population in Chicago. And we had to learn them in some German, a lot of them spoke German, some spoke French. But most of our interpreters was Americans. We had to use Germans, but we couldn't speak the language. So that was kind of interesting. Strangest thing that I ever experienced, and never thought about it, but we went on leave in Switzerland. Well, the Germans and Italians went on leave also in Switzerland. And here we were, eating in the same cafeteria, riding on the same streetcars, and then a few days later we go back trying to kill each other. And it was a real strange feeling to be surrounded with all the enemy and then us too. And we all wanted to go to Switzerland because we could call home from there. You go into Switzerland, we were in Montreux, Switzerland, and put in a phone call to our home, and 3 days later we picked it up at another town, Bern, Switzerland, and got a chance to talk to our folks. And then we, another time, went on leave over, and I had my 20th birthday in Evesham, England, and we went there because we could call home from England also. But you didn't have time to be lonesome, to be trying to stay alive and keep warm. On the tax duty, they sent us down to Dachau concentration camp. And before we got there, we began to smell the odor. And we took tobacco and put in our handkerchiefs and put them around our noses. And you see, there were thousands of people just dead, stacked up, sometimes 100 feet high, just bodies. And the Germans just tried to destroy all of them they could. Some were half burned, some were just, most of them were just shriveled up to nothing. And our doctors did some autopsies on some of their bodies, and they opened the liver, it was just a clear liquid. There was no bile at all. There was nothing. And there were so many of them were way past any kind of help, medical help. They couldn't find a vein or anything else. It was just skin and bones. And a lot of people don't realize how much the Germans suffered also. Dachau concentration camp was originally constructed, if I remember correctly, for the Germans, because anyone who opposed Hitler, you either got shot or you got put in a concentration camp. And that was where they were put in Dachau to start with. And of course later on it evolved into a death camp for everybody just about. When the war ended, there was one tank of us, 5 of us, in Volkermark, Austria. And all of a sudden we began to get all these German Panzers, German tank divisions coming in. And there were thousands of troops coming out of Russia. Well, we couldn't understand that. It scared us to death, frankly, because it was just 5 of us, but there was perfect order. And they were getting away from the Russians because they knew what they had done to the Russians, and we didn't. And so they were trying to get under American jurisdiction. And we had thousands and thousands of prisoners in camps we had to feed, look after for health purposes and everything else. And trying to repatriate those people. Then I was in the Army of Occupation after that, and I was stationed in Rotenburg, Germany, and lived with an American family that owned a hotel there, a romantic hotel in Markstrom. And they had a young son, 14 years old, and we used to come up every Sunday and say, "Shall we make a walk?" And they are both all gone now. They're all dead now, but they were very, very nice people, and I enjoyed visiting with them very much. And then down in Passau, Poking by Passau, had an aid station down there, and I was billeted with a doctor in Frau Schnell. He was a German doctor, and many a time, one night they came to get me. There was a young fellow had committed suicide in a little village near where I was stationed, and so I had to go get him and had to bring him back. And the doctor Schnell had a sun machine, what we used to call sun machine, and you put some grease in your face and you get a suntan. Well, I forgot about the grease, and I walked outside in below zero weather. My face froze with that grease. But I had to go and get this guy and bring him back and keep him overnight with me in the room with me, because we couldn't get to grave registration people until the next day. And Miss Snell had gotten up and made hot chocolate and some food for us to eat. And of course they're all gone now. But they had a little girl named Crystal. She was 3 years old then. And about 4 years ago, I got a phone call. And she said, "Hans, this is Crystal. Wo bist du? How are you?" And I said, "Where in the world are you?" She said, "I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida." She had married an American and has moved to Fort Lauderdale. And so we still correspond back and forth. Of course, my mother and dad now both gone. But there are a lot of memories of that. Good. I think the one thing that I'll always remember is how cold I was. It was always below zero. It was always snowing. And we were always out in it. And also after the war, the war ended, we began to get to German houses. and we used to break up that furniture and put it in the fireplaces to keep warm. We were cold. And one time we were really hungry. We had nothing to eat much, and so we found some potatoes, but we couldn't find anything to cook them in. So we found an old slop jar, and we took that and boiled it real good to clean it up and fried the potatoes in that. And it wasn't long after that we all came down with hepatitis. So the whole outfit was in the hospital with hepatitis. So we spent 3 months in France and not to France in the hospital with hepatitis. But thank goodness I got over it, no problem. All the head falls was hard candy, but we ate that. And we had to fly back to France from Germany and couldn't fly very high because we had a lot of troops on there with stomach wounds, and they couldn't go very high because the fluid would come out of their stomachs. And so it was pretty messy, folks throwing up in all directions. Quite interesting. And then I used to look in the mirror sometimes and think, how in the world are they going to find me and send me home out of all these millions of people over here? But they did, and I came back on what they call a victory ship called the Piston Victory, and we got on board in Bremerhaven, Germany, and had fresh milk and all. It was just wonderful. And then we hit the North Sea, and the fresh milk came right back out again. And if you've ever been in line of thousands of troops on one ship, and everybody throwing up, coming down the stairway, it was just cascading. It was right interesting. And there's no water to get a shower. So we took us 2 weeks to cross the ocean. Then that little ship came about 9 knots, 10, 12 knots. And we boarded a train and went down to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And they went through all the little steps trying to keep us in the service, and we walked. And no thank you, we want to go home. So we got out and came back, and then came back home. It all happened so long ago. I feel like it happened to a different person. You know, I was 19 then. I'm 86 now. Well, I was elated, and yet I was kind of sad because I hate to leave my friends, around all. And also, when you live with a group of people like that, it took me a good while to get used to being alone when I got home. Because everywhere in the Army, there's always somebody with you at all times, just about. And you get to depend on somebody else for your life. It's difficult to leave them. And I think one of the interesting things is I went all the way across the ocean and down the train and took a bus from Belleville, North Carolina to Dothan. And the bus station used to be over there on Foster Street. And I got a taxi for the bus and started home. And my dad drove out of the driveway all the way home and ran into him just as I was getting off the bus. I remember I was so surprised. My mother had a big streak of gray hair across her head, and it wasn't there when I left to go. She used to write faithfully. I got all kinds of letters. Sometimes they come in bunches, and sometimes otherwise. I really didn't know what to do. I went down to Stetson University in DeLand, Florida, and I was kind of a lost soul. But there were a lot of GIs down there at the time, and I went into education down there. And very fortunately, I had a wonderful professor, Dr. Sowers. And I went to Jacksonville, Florida to teach for a while. I taught 1 year, became assistant principal of high school. And 4 years later, I became principal of high school. I was principal at DuPont High School in Jacksonville, Florida for 15 years down there. And then my dad died, and Ben Wood's daddy died, and we moved back to Dothan to look after our mothers. And we were so glad we got back to Dothan, and our children were small, and they were able to go to Dothan High School. We just had one high school then, and the whole town behind it. It was just a wonderful Friday night. Everybody in Dothan would go to one game, and everybody was behind the whole team. It was really nice. We enjoyed the children, had a good time. And Dothan's a wonderful place to grow up and live. It's still a wonderful town. It has a great deal to offer for families, I think. It was about the best part of the world, I believe. I really do, right there in the corner of South Alabama.